Hey, good morning, amazing women. Happy International Women's Day. I am so excited to be here with you and share my talk, Hidden Pieces. Drop a hey in the comments if you are excited to be here. It's early, it's Sunday morning, but I'm so glad that you're here. A few years ago, at the height of the pandemic, I decided to uproot my entire family, sell everything, and move to Oregon. I vividly remember the first morning in our new house near the farmlands, stepping outside and feeling that crisp morning air carried the scent of dew and freshly spread fertilizer. It was a familiar smell, though. I grew up in the country. Drop a heart in the chat if you're a country girl like me. It was very refreshing to be in a place that reminded me of my childhood, but also be close enough to the city to where if we ever needed anything, we could go get it. So I did grow up on a farm in a very rural, very conservative, and very religious community. It was a place where quiet isolation and wide open spaces formed the backdrop of my formative years. Life on our farm was peaceful, but sometimes it was lonely, especially as an only child. I had a single parent. We lived with my grandfather, and I often had long periods of time to think, reflect, and observe the world around me. So, on this particular morning, fast forwarding back to 2020, in my new home, standing on my new porch, holding a steaming cup of coffee, I took some time to reflect on how much life had changed. And as one's mind often does in times like this, a thought occurred to me. My mind went to this place and it said, what makes us who we are? I decided in that moment that our lives are like these intricate jigsaw puzzles made up of countless pieces. Some of those pieces we proudly display, like our roles, our job titles, our achievements, but so many others, whether it's conscious or not, remain hidden, sometimes even from ourselves. Now, exploring this thought, I started to see my life as one of those puzzles. I saw each of my puzzle pieces forming the pillars of who I am. Now, being at the height of global pandemic and lockdowns, one of these pieces really came to the forefront of my mind, and that was the need for connection. Humans require connection for survival. We are social creatures, and whether we want to admit it or not, we have to connect with other humans. Even today, I crave in-person connection more than anything. So I'd love for you to drop a one in the chat, if you are like me and would love it if we could all be in the same room right now, feeding off of each other's energy. As you can imagine, growing up in the boonies, there were not a lot of opportunities to connect with other people. Zoom didn't exist yet, and we just didn't have the ways to connect that we have today. So this meant that if an opportunity to connect with someone face to face presented itself, you jumped on it. For me, that opportunity came in the strangest of places, middle school. I know, you're cocking an eyebrow saying, what, middle school? Me too. But let me paint the picture for you. It all began on an ordinary August day in 1994. I was an awkward and nervous 11-year-old lost in the sea of noise and people in our middle school hallways. We had to choose one arts class as sixth graders. We could choose from choir, band, or drama. I chose band, and that seemingly insignificant decision simultaneously ignited a spark within my heart and changed the course of my life. And when I stepped into that band room, rows of empty chairs, all these music stands, and a whole bunch of instruments greeted me. I decided to pursue the clarinet. That was the instrument that spoke to my heart. Now, it did take some convincing with my mom. We didn't have a lot of money, and I was fortunate enough that the school had an instrument that I could use until we were able to acquire our own. So I was able to start playing on that instrument, and I was a band student. I remember the first time holding my instrument in my hand and blowing through it. Now, all that came out was a squawk, but that's okay. That's pretty typical for beginning clarinet players. But that feeling reverberated through me. Now, I would love to know, who are my fellow band kids out there? Drop a 2 in the chat if you have ever been a band kid, a piano kid, a music kid of any kind. And I would love to know too, if you're up to sharing, when you first started or at any point in time where you were a music kid, did you feel that same spark, that same sense of belonging to a greater piece of something than just yourself? I would love to know, because for me, music was instantly my gateway to connecting with others. Now, by the 8th grade, I wasn't just a member of the band. I was excelling under the mentorship of my amazing teacher, who I am still friends with to this day, and who was able to teach my son when he started playing the trumpet. He pushed me to learn additional instruments, encouraged me to play in our high school and community ensembles, and he encouraged me to take on my own students. His belief in me was a gift, and it was one that would shape my confidence and really help me find my sense of self in this world. Under his guidance and through teaching private lessons, I discovered a passion for teaching. At 16, I was teaching students and watching them learn and grow just as I was still doing alongside them. And I remember the thrill of watching them master things and try new things for the first time and hit new notes that they hadn't hit before. I realized that their success and triumphs mirrored my own. And I felt the spark of joy and passion anytime that I was able to teach. Now, for me, teaching wasn't just a way to share knowledge. Teaching was a way to foster those deep and meaningful connections that I had always craved. Now, these connections were something I had longed for many years before I ever sat in my very first band class. Remember, living on the farm, my nearest neighbors were quite far away, and opportunities to socialize were very few and far in between. But music filled a void that I didn't even know was there. I knew that through music, I could make the connections and find my community and people that understood who I am. Fast forward to my late 20s, life became this juggling act of responsibilities. I was in college full time for the second time around, full time parent, full time employee. I owned a house and all of those things that come along with being an adult. In the midst of all of this chaos came an unexpected conversation that changed everything from that point forward. Now, I was a music major. I was required to take lessons every week on my primary instrument. I was at the top of my game, and I'm pretty sure I even taught my instructor a few things at this point, but I still took the lessons every week as required. Now, one week in the fall of 2011, I walked into my weekly lesson after work, and my instructor asked me if I had ever thought about being a military musician. I didn't really think much about it, but he let me know that a Marine Corps recruiter had reached out to him to see if he had any clarinet players that were up to the task of becoming Marine musicians. I come from a long line of service members, both of my parents, uncles, my in laws, numerous people that I am related to have served in our nation's armed forces, but none of them have served in the Marines and none of them served as musicians. So this idea intrigued me, but it also felt impossible. How could I, then a 28-year-old mother and student, wife, employee, be able to make such a drastic change? I would have to leave behind my home, that family, that job, everything. Could I really do it? The next few weeks were a blur of conversations with recruiters and mentors and family. Deep down, I knew the answer. If I didn't take this leap, I would have to live with the fact that when I was presented with the opportunity to serve my country in a pretty unique way, that I didn't do it. And that simply was not going to happen. I enlisted at age 29, defying every expectation society had for a woman my age. Boot camp was a brutal test of endurance, each day going through physical challenges and forging unbreakable bonds with my fellow recruits. Once out in the fleet with my unit, we performed in concerts and we performed in small ensembles and we went on tour and we did all the things that Marines do normally and being combat ready. And through these experiences, I was reminded of the truth that I had long understood, that connection and shared passion give us strength. Put a heart in the chat if anyone you know or someone you love has ever served our nation. My time as a Marine musician transformed me. It taught me that life's most meaningful moments come when we step outside the boxes society prescribes for us. And that brings me to my point today. We women are often burdened by rigid cultural and social expectations. They are designed to hold us back. We are told to follow prescribed timelines, when to get married, when to have children, whether or not to re enter the workforce. We need to stay skinny. We need to stay young. We can't be too skinny. We can't look too young. The list goes on. You get the point. Comment yes in the chat if anyone has ever said anything like this to you. We are pressured and conditioned to present a curated image to the world, to be polished, quiet, and agreeable, but never to be ourselves. My journey has showed me that I don't have to conform to anyone else's expectations or prescriptions for my life. My journey continues to show me that true fulfillment comes from breaking the molds and embracing the pieces of ourselves that make us who we really are and that we've been taught to hide. I'm reminded of the story of one of my past clients, whom we'll call Sarah. Sarah grew up in a household where children were to be seen and not heard. Now, I want to know if anyone else grew up like this. Put a 1 in the chat if you are someone who grew up in a household where you were meant to be seen but never heard. This belief shaped Sarah into adulthood, even into her late 50s. And it wasn't until I met her that she realized the toll it had taken on her. She had missed out on business opportunities, relationships, even suffered financial losses because she was afraid to speak up and use her voice, all because someone told her not to when she was young. Finally, she had enough and decided it was time to change her narrative. Sarah learned to turn her quietness into her superpower. She was able to speak in a way that people will lean in, and she's no longer afraid to use her voice. I was so happy to be there when Sarah took the stage for the first time to an audience of 50 people. She shared her story for the first time. She was no longer a woman who feared sharing her voice and felt like she had to hide that piece of herself. Sarah's transformation is a reminder of the societal conditioning that so many of us face. We are taught to shrink ourselves to fit into spaces where others want us, rather than to grow and force the spaces to be large enough for who we are. Now, I want you to remember you have the power to rewrite that script for yourself. And it begins by recognizing your own hidden pieces and daring to share them. You see, we reveal ourselves in the pieces that we share with others, but it takes courage and a willingness to be vulnerable to share them. As leaders, we don't want to be seen as weak, so we tend to shy away from vulnerability. Today, I challenge you to lean into it. Today, I want to begin unearthing those hidden pieces of yourself that could be the keys to your success. To do this, I invite you to grab my free resource, Unearthed, a guide to discovering and embracing your hidden pieces. This resource includes a worksheet and a video that you can work through to help you start finding those hidden pieces of yourself that you can bring to the table to make you a better leader, a stronger connector, a better communicator, and a more complete version of yourself. In this exercise, we'll begin by identifying just one of your hidden pieces. I'll ask you to reflect on those parts of yourself that you keep concealed, what's in the shadows, and what needs to be brought into the light. After that, I'll challenge you to really question the beliefs and the expectations that you've held to for so long. I want you to recognize moments of fear and judgment and how they hold you back. And then lastly, I'll encourage you to think deeper about how you can connect more authentically with others by digging into those deeper connections that you have within yourself and those hidden pieces that you have kept in the shadows for so long. I want you to take a moment now and think about how you might be hiding behind your hidden pieces, how certain things about yourself are holding you back, or fears that you might have about being judged for certain things. Sit with it for just a moment. And if you're feeling brave enough, drop it in the chat. Now consider for a moment how many versions of yourself you present to the world. You're always hiding some of your pieces, but what if you didn't have to do that? What if you could show up fully and confidently as your authentic self with everyone that you meet? Imagine the freedom and the impact that could bring. Let this be your moment to reclaim your identity as your true self. As Dr. Seuss once said, there is no one on earth youer than you. In a world that often tries to keep us in pieces, being fully and authentically you is the most courageous act of all. Thank you.